Good morning, Little Masters, and welcome back to today's Tolkien Times. I'm the Man of the West, also from the Prancing Pony podcast. Let's keep week 44 going with today's Tolkien Tuesday. Now, we're back in the revised and expanded letters this series, this time focusing on letters around the time of The Lord of the Rings. Now, last time, we wrapped up with letter 143E, as Tolkien acknowledged some errors in the runic decoration of the title page. He lamented that he would have to bear the brunt of any later explanations or apologies to the not a few folks who would catch the errors. Today, we're going to start by moving forward to letter 146A. Now, again, we're not reading the ones that we read in Series 1 and 2. We're just focusing on the newly published letters or on newly published segments of letters that were found in the previous editions. So if you haven't listened to those first two series of Tolkien Tuesdays, do that, and you'll be able to kind of put it all together. Now, letter 146A was sent to Allen and Unwin on June 10th, 1954. It's very brief, so I'm actually going to read the whole thing. I return herewith the head reader's queries. I have accepted nearly all of them. I am very grateful indeed and astonished at his close attention, not only to ordinary detail, but to the story and its idiom. Now, I want to know more about this head reader. And did someone pass on this incredible praise from Professor Tolkien to that head reader? What a glorious thing for them to learn. Man, that would put me on cloud nine for the rest of my life. What a professional accomplishment that is right there. Man. So next up is letter 148. Now, this, of course, is already in the original volume. It was written a week or so after publication of The Fellowship of the Ring. But there is some new material in the letter worth looking at. The letter is to Catherine Farrer, and it's from August 7th, 1954. The Fellowship had just been published on July 29th. Now, you might know this letter as it has that well-known discussion about nasturtiums with an N and nasturtiums with an M. But the following is new. He writes that her last letter was extremely welcome. Among other uses, it has helped me to endure such reviews as that of Lambert in the Sunday Times. Now, I've not been able to find the entirety of Lambert's review, but I have found some quotes from it. And honestly, the quotes that I've found are, well, positive and less so. On the plus side, Lambert wrote, "In carrying out this Wagnerian project, Tolkien has distilled elements of Norse, Teutonic, and Celtic myth to make a strange but coherent world of his own." Okay, I mean, it doesn't sound like an insult, but he does call it a Wagnerian thing, so maybe that's what threw Tolkien, I don't know. He also said that Tolkien's allegory is not unduly stressed, and that the story of the pilgrimage is followed with verve and humor and cunning variations of pace and style. And, as I mentioned all the way back in week 2, he also wrote that it sweeps along with a narrative and pictorial force. But he did also add that the story had two odd characteristics: no religious spirit of any kind, and, to all intents and purposes, no women. Maybe that's what got Tolkien feeling like he had to endure these reviews. Anyway, back to his letter to Catherine Farrer. He acknowledges that publishing the story in 3 separate parts is to blame for these kinds of reviews. Just the sort of thing I feared, he says, and fully expected, since piecemeal publication so increases the risk of it. Not that expectation does much to dull the smart when it comes. How easy it is to make anything ridiculous. He is right about that. Now, 11 days later, on August 18th, he again writes to Ms. Farrer, this time in an all-new letter number 148A, which was in response to her sending him a draft of her review. He writes, "As you are probably the most sensitive and perceptive of my prime readers, there is no need to feel any trepidation." Now, I'm really glad that they added this letter because it reveals some of Tolkien's own thoughts on the story. He expresses delight that Farrer emphasized the morality of the story. He adds, "I think actually it is that which gives the story its realness and coherence, which my critics seem to feel, rather than any pictorial vividness. It was not planned, of course, but arose naturally in the attempt to treat the matter seriously, but it is now the foundation." Indeed, Tolkien even goes so far as to provide what he thinks is the central example of that morality. He writes, "For me, the kernel is in Frodo's last words to Sam. I have been too deeply hurt. I tried to save the Shire, and it has been saved, but not for me. It must often be so, Sam. When things are in danger, someone has to give them up, lose them, so that others may keep them. All that I had or might have had, I leave to you." Tolkien even says that he's thinking of adding something to the end of the story. As Sam stands forlorn, a faint cry over the water, echoing the end of Galadriel's elvish song. Namarie, nai hiruvalye valimar. Farewell, maybe you too shall find Valimar. But then Tolkien wonders if that would spoil the bleak simplicity. I don't know. I see why he was tempted to do that, but I think it is, in its bleak simplicity, as he called it, probably the better ending. Now, there's also new material in letter number 151, written to Hugh Brogan on September 18th, that is insightful. He explains that many of Hugh's questions will be answered by the subsequent volumes, before pointing out that he was all against this piecemeal method, as the work is certainly not a trilogy, as the publishers dubbed it while my eye was off the ball, being in Ireland or immersed in exams, but one story with a single shape. Reviewers can hardly be blamed for finding the first fragment shapeless. Can we just make that a trend? Hashtag not a trilogy? I mean, come on. Tolkien even goes into some of the detail as to why it was in 3 volumes, the stuff that we've read about in earlier letters back and forth with the publisher. He says to Brogan, I had much difficulty in getting the thing into print at all, and had to bow to the decision that it was too large and expensive to issue in one dollop at between 3 and 4 pounds. Now, according to the Bank of England's inflation calculator, 4 pounds in 1954 is the equivalent of almost 92 pounds today, or nearly $117. So yeah, it's still probably the better decision. And we even get some insight as to why Tolkien might have had to endure that apparently somewhat positive review. He writes, with a few exceptions, the reviews have either been rather patronizing or out and out contemptuous. Maybe he saw even some of these positive reviews as simply patronizing instead. Well, we'll end this Tolkien Tuesday with letter number 158A to Rayner Unwin, written on December 20th, 1954. Tolkien had been asked to send any materials that he had ready for the appendices. Otherwise, the publisher would have to release The Return of the King without them. Tolkien apologized for the delay and adds, I have been trying hard, but I have been grievously harried, and also, for the last week or more, ill. He adds he'll try to send it off the very next day, but acknowledges it will be, already then, far too late. He really has had a rough go of it, explaining that I have had more than any one person could cope with this year, and domestic troubles, and I am completely exhausted. Indeed, with The Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers having been published earlier that year, just in July and in November, and here it is December, and with The Return of the King nearing publication as well, or at least that's the plan, Tolkien has been exceedingly busy. And that doesn't even include all of his professional obligations, family matters, or personal health. I'm glad they give him a little bit of extra time to get those appendices in. For now, though, folks, that wraps it up for this week's Tolkien Tuesday. Be sure to join me again next week for more Letters from Tolkien. In the meantime, please visit patreon.com/TolkienTimes to learn how you can join the Content Council and be a part of deciding what I talk about on next series Tolkien Tuesday. You also can support the show, get an ad-free feed, and a bonus episode every week. Now join me again tomorrow on today's Tolkien Times for Word Nerd Wednesday. If you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Please follow or subscribe in your podcast apps and follow @Tolkien Times on social media. Finally, as Faramir says, go with the goodwill of all good men.